Do you have areas of your life that feel off? Meaning they don't feel the way you want them to, even though you've been trying to change them. It could be your relationships, career, money, health, or your sense of well being. It could also be that life just feels way too hard. It could be that you have certain habits: emotional eating, scrolling, wine, shopping, overworking, procrastination, people pleasing that you've been working hard to get rid of, but you fall into the same trap over and over. If that's you, you definitely want to stay tuned because in this video, I'm going to show you why it all makes sense and give you a way to start shifting from the life you're living to the life you want to be living. So by the end of this video, you'll have a simple way to look at the 5 areas of your life and begin seeing where you might be living from adaptation without even knowing it. You may discover that something you've thought was simply who you are or simply how life works is neither of those things. Last week, I uploaded a video that introduced the idea that there are two different versions of you, and that one of those versions is creating the life you live at all times. One version is the adapted self, which develops in response to our experiences and our circumstances. It's who we become in order to navigate our lives. Our adapted self perceives the world in an adapted way and has thoughts, feelings, and actions that are consistent with this view. Your adapted self began developing very early in your life. And as you experience the world, you learn things about yourself, about other people, about how life works. You learned what you needed to do to feel safe, to belong, to be loved, to avoid conflict, to get your needs met, or sometimes simply to get through what was happening. And from those experiences, you developed beliefs, emotional patterns, nervous system responses, and behaviors that made sense within the life that you were living. The important thing to understand is that we don't leave those adaptations behind when the circumstances that created them are over. We carry them forward, and they become part of the lens through which we continue to see ourselves and the world. If I learned that making mistakes had painful consequences, I may come to believe that mistakes are dangerous. And that belief would then affect the way I perceive a challenge at work, the thoughts I have about whether I'm capable of handling it, the anxiety I feel, and what I ultimately do. I might procrastinate because starting something feels risky. I might overwork because I need to make sure I get everything right. I might never pursue something I deeply want because I can't guarantee that I'll succeed. Now, eventually, I may simply say, I'm a procrastinator, I'm a perfectionist, I've never been very good at taking risks. I don't see that those are adaptations. They just kind of feel like me now. The same thing happens with the beliefs that we develop about our lives, right? If my experience has taught me that there's never enough money, I may not experience that as a belief that I developed. I may just experience it as a fact about money. If I learned that relationships require me to keep other people happy, I may simply believe that that's what it means to love someone. If I learned that my value comes from what I accomplish, being productive may feel less like something I do and more like who I am. And this is why adaptations can be so difficult to recognize. They've been with us for so long that we often don't experience them as something we learned. We just experience them as truth. Now, the other version of us, that's our expansive self, which is who you are underneath the adaptations. It's the truth of who you are. This is the version of you that has more freedom to meet life as it is today. Instead of automatically interpreting what's happening through everything that you've learned in the past, over here in the expansive self, there's enough capacity and safety to become curious about what is happening now. You can notice what you feel, understand what you need, consider what matters to you, and respond, not react, in a way that reflects the person you are and the life you want to create. So, for example, in my family of origin, they were quite overwhelmed when I arrived on the scene. And my needs were more than there was capacity for. And so I, like every other human, adapted to my experience by developing adapted thoughts. And one of them was, my needs are a burden. It's safer, easier when I don't ask for anything. Now, my expansive self believes my needs are important alongside the needs of others. It knows that I am one of the people in my life that I can work to please. Now, when the adapted self is at the helm, my needs are discarded and everyone else is more important. When my expansive self is in charge, I'm in touch with my needs and how to get them met. This one small example illustrates how life can be very different depending on whether your adapted or expansive self is leading and creating life. Now imagine if there are many adapted patterns involved in working at the same time. If you didn't catch last week's video, I've linked it in the description and you can go back and watch it for a deeper understanding of those two versions of you. But you don't need to have seen that for what we're going to do today. So if you want to live more of your life as your expansive self, one of the first things you get to do is begin identifying your adaptations, right? You have to be able to see the beliefs, the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors that may be shaping your life before you can begin to question whether they still belong there. The challenge, of course, is figuring out where adaptation is still shaping your life when you can't necessarily see it easily. This is one of the places that we can start, though, is with life itself, okay? So if there is an area of life that doesn't feel the way you want it to feel, it doesn't mean you've caused everything that has happened there or that you've done something wrong, but it does give us a place to become curious. There may be beliefs underneath the way that you're approaching that part of your life that you've never thought to question. That's what we're going to look for today. We're going to use 5 areas of your life to begin uncovering some of the beliefs that might be underneath them. Now, we're not going to try to decide whether those beliefs are right or wrong, or even whether they're true. We're just going to get curious about where they came from, how they may be shaping your life today, and whether there might be another way, a more aligned way to see things. So let's start with a piece of paper, right? You'll have to pause the video as you go through the exercise and write down what you need to. But you're going to write 5 areas of your life across 5 different sheets of paper to give yourself plenty of room. Relationships, finances, health, purpose and fulfillment, peace and well-being. And for relationships, I want you to think broadly. This can include your romantic relationships, certainly if you have one, your family relationships, your friendships, and the amount and quality of connection you have in your life. Finances includes not only how much money you have or make, but your relationship with money, how secure you feel financially, and whether the way you earn and spend and save and use money feels good to you. Your health includes your physical health, your energy, your relationship with your body, food, movement, the way you take care of yourself. Purpose and fulfillment include your work, but it's bigger than your job. This is about whether the way you spend your time and energy feels meaningful to you. Do you feel like you're using yourself in ways that matter to you? Are there things you want to create, contribute, experience, or pursue that have a place in your life? And the last category is peace and well-being. You can include spirituality here if that's important to you, but what I'm really interested in is how it feels to be you and live your life. How much peace do you experience? How present are you for your life? Is there room for enjoyment? Do you feel connected to yourself? And when there isn't a problem demanding your attention, are you able to settle into your life and just enjoy being there? So make any notes that you want to in these 5 areas, and then give yourself a satisfaction score from 1 to 5 in each of these areas. It's not a score of how well you're doing. I really want to make that clear because it would be very easy to turn this into another way to evaluate yourself. But I'm asking how satisfied you are with this part of your life as it exists today. You could have a wonderful family and people you love, but still realize that you're lonely, or your relationships don't have the kind of depth or connection that you want. You could make a lot of money and still give your finances a 3 because you're constantly worried about money, or because earning it requires you to live in a way that you don't enjoy living. You could be incredibly successful in your career and give purpose and fulfillment a 3 because the work you're doing doesn't feel meaningful to you anymore. The number isn't important by itself. We're just using it to notice where there might be a gap between the life you're living and the life that feels right to you. And after you've done this, take a minute, look at your scores, and you may have areas that feel wonderful. That's important information too. We're not starting from the assumption that everything in your life is being driven by negative adaptation. There may be parts of your life where you feel very much like yourself and where what you've created reflects what matters to you. And then there may be areas that you gave a 2 or maybe even a 1. And that's where you can really become more interested. Instead of immediately asking, what do I need to do to make this better? I want you to just hold off on trying to solve anything. We're going to look underneath what you're doing and ask a different question. What do I believe about this part of my life? Now, when I ask you what you believe about this part of your life, I'm not necessarily asking for something you consciously decided was true. In fact, the beliefs we're looking for are often the ones you never thought to question. So let's say relationships are an area where you are not very satisfied. What do you believe about relationships? You might believe relationships are hard. People eventually leave. You can't really trust anyone. That if you want a relationship to work, you have to be willing to sacrifice yourself. You might believe that your needs are too much, like I used to. That conflict means the relationship is in trouble or broken, or that it's your responsibility to make sure the other person is happy. Some of those beliefs may be so familiar that you wouldn't even think to write them down as beliefs. You might say, well, of course that's true. Of course relationships require sacrifice. Or of course you can't completely trust another person. And that's exactly the kind of thing I want you to notice. When something feels so obvious, get curious about it. Do the same thing with finances. What do you believe about money? Maybe you believe there's never enough. You have to work really hard to make money. Money can disappear at any time. You're just not good with money, right? Wanting a lot of money is greedy. Financial security means having a certain amount in the bank, right? Maybe you believe you'll finally be able to relax when you have enough money, while the definition of enough keeps moving. With health, you may discover that your beliefs about your body or about your ability to take care of it. Maybe you've spent years telling yourself, oh, I have no willpower. I don't follow through. I can't trust myself around food. I'm just not somebody who exercises, or that your body has to look a certain way before you can feel good about it. Maybe caring for yourself just feels like one more thing you're supposed to be doing correctly. So even your health has become another place where you can fail or succeed. With purpose and fulfillment, okay, you can have an entirely different set of beliefs underneath it, right? You may believe that work is supposed to be hard, that being responsible means putting what you want aside, or that you can't make a living doing something you really enjoy. Maybe you believe it's too late to change direction, that you need to know exactly what you're doing before you begin, or that you have to be successful at something for it to be worth your time. You may have spent so many years doing what made sense or what other people needed from you that you haven't stopped to ask, what would you choose? And then when you look at peace and well-being, what have you come to believe what has to happen before you can feel okay? Maybe you can only relax when everything is done, as if that will ever happen. You can feel peaceful when everyone you love is okay and happy. You can enjoy your life when you've solved the problem of the day or yourself. Maybe you've become so accustomed to looking for what needs to be handled next that you don't know what it feels like to simply be in your life without needing to improve something. As you're doing this exercise, please don't worry about whether you found the right beliefs. Just write down what comes up. Pay particular attention to the things you say to yourself all the time and the assumptions that seem so obvious you normally wouldn't even call them beliefs. Then go back and read what you've written. And as you do, ask yourself, how do I know this is true? Not whether you have evidence of it. We can usually find plenty of evidence for the things we've believed for years, right? Instead, become curious about where the belief itself came from. When did you begin seeing relationships this way? What taught you that money worked this way? Where did you learn what your body was supposed to look like or how you were supposed to care for it? Who taught you what it meant to be successful, responsible, productive, or safe? You may immediately know, or you may have no idea. You don't have to figure out the origin of every single belief for this exercise to be useful. Consider that some of the things you've been treating as facts about yourself and life may instead be conclusions you reached based on the life you experienced. They may be adaptations. And now I invite you, choose one, just one of the beliefs you wrote down, preferably one from an area of your life where your satisfaction score was a little lower than you'd like it to be. And look at that belief and ask yourself what happens when you live as though it's true. So let's say one of the beliefs you wrote down is about relationships and it says, I can't really trust anyone. If you believe that, right, you're going to approach your relationships very differently than someone who believes that people can generally be trusted. You may look for signs that something's wrong. You may read more into someone's behavior than is really there. You may need more reassurance. You may hold parts of yourself back because being completely vulnerable feels way too dangerous. You may choose people who reinforce what you already believe, or stay in relationships where trust isn't possible because on some level, that's what you expect relationships to be. And then years later, you can look at your relationship history and say, yep, see, I knew it. I knew people can't be trusted. The life you have lived becomes evidence for the belief without ever recognizing how much the belief itself may have influenced the life you created. The same thing can be true about money. If you believe that money only comes from working incredibly hard, you may build a life where you have to work incredibly hard to make money. You may overlook opportunities that don't fit that belief. You may feel uncomfortable when something comes easy. You may keep adding more work because working harder is what you know to do when you want greater financial security. Then you look at your life and conclude, yep, of course, making money is exhausting. Your experience appears to prove the belief. If you believe that you're someone who has no willpower around food, imagine how differently you might enter every experience with food if you didn't think you are automatically going to lose control. You may create rules to control yourself, break those rules, feel ashamed, and then make stricter rules. Eventually, you have lots of evidence that you can't trust yourself around food without recognizing that you've been living inside an entire system built around that belief. And this is why we're not simply trying to come up with a more positive belief today, right? We're not going to put, I don't want you to, put down, I can't trust anyone and try to convince yourself everyone is trustworthy. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it. And it isn't necessarily true anyway. Instead, look at the belief you've chosen and ask yourself whether you're willing to consider that it may not be as true as you think. It may be something you learned. It may have developed for a very good reason at some point, right? There may have been a time in your life when seeing the world this way helped you understand what was happening, protect yourself, belong, or get through something that was really difficult. It doesn't mean it has to remain the set of instructions that you use to build your life today. Now look back at the satisfaction score you gave this area of your life and ask, how has living from this belief affected what I've created here? No blame. You didn't consciously sit down and choose these beliefs. You learned them through life. The purpose of this exercise is to make visible something that may have been operating outside of your awareness. Because once you see the belief, you can begin to get curious about whether you still want to build your life from it. We're going to do one last thing with the belief that you've chosen, okay? Imagine for a moment that this belief isn't true. You don't have to stop believing it. You don't have to convince yourself of anything different. Just give yourself permission to consider the possibility that this is an adaptation you developed based on what you experienced rather than an absolute truth about you or life. Then ask yourself, if I didn't have to build this part of my life around this belief, what might become possible? If I didn't believe that I had to keep everyone happy in order to have good relationships, how might I show up differently with the people I love? Maybe I would say what I really think more often. Maybe I would be more honest about what I need. Maybe I would allow someone to be disappointed in me without immediately assuming I had done something wrong. Maybe I would find out that some of my relationships can hold more of me than I've been allowing myself to bring to them. If I didn't believe that financial security required me to work all the time, what might I become open for? I might begin questioning whether the way I'm earning money is the only way available to me. I might make different decisions about my time. I might notice opportunities I haven't been able to see because they didn't fit what I believed was required. I might even begin asking what financial security means to me instead of automatically pursuing the version of it I learned. This is the beginning of what I mean when I talk about living from your expansive self. Because your expansive self isn't a version of you who has figured everything out or who never gets afraid. It's the version of you who has enough freedom inside to question the instructions instead of automatically following them, questioning them, trying them on, deciding what's true. For years, you may have been trying to change the results in your life, but you continue to build from the same beliefs about yourself and the world. And you can work incredibly hard that way. You can change jobs, start another diet, make another budget, end a relationship, begin another one, read another book, or make another promise to yourself that this time you're going to do things differently, right? But those are times when we usually just keep creating the same version of the same experience because the beliefs underneath our choices haven't changed. That's why I don't want you to leave this exercise with 5 areas of your life that you now need to work on. That's not the point. You can choose one belief that surprised you or one that you can see has the most meaningful effect on your life, and then spend some time with it this week. Notice when it shows up. Notice the decisions you make from it, the things you assume because of it, the way it affects what seems possible to you. Then keep coming back to the question we started with. What might become possible if I didn't have to build my life from this belief anymore? Now, you may be looking at the belief you chose and be thinking, okay, I can see where this came from. I can see how it has affected my life. I can even see that it may not be true. So how do I change it? This is where I want to be careful because recognizing an adapted belief and being able to let it go are two very different things. These beliefs didn't develop because you sat down one day and decided what you wanted to believe about relationships, money, your body, success, or yourself. They developed through experience. They became connected to what helped you feel safe, get your needs met, make sense of what was happening, or navigate the life you were living. Some of them may have been reinforced for decades. So if you've discovered today that you believe, I have to make everyone happy, say, the answer is not to tell yourself, other people's happiness isn't my responsibility. That you're not going to say that to yourself 50 times and the belief is going to disappear. You may understand that intellectually and still feel tremendous anxiety the next time someone you love is unhappy with you. This is why so much of my work focuses on creating the internal conditions that allow us to adapt again, that allow us to try on new beliefs. In my book, You're Not the Problem, I talk about the 3 conditions that you need to be able to feel safe enough to do this work: safety, capacity, and energy. When we have enough internal safety to question an old belief without feeling threatened by what might happen if we stop following it, enough capacity to experience the feelings that come up when we try something different, and enough energy to move toward what we actually want, our adaptations can begin to shift. That's very different from trying to force yourself into a new belief because you've decided the old one isn't serving you anymore. If you want to understand this process more deeply, You're Not the Problem walks you through it. I've put information for the book down below in the description of this video. You can also go back and watch last week's video if you want a deeper understanding of expansive and adapted selves and how each one shapes the life that you create. For now, though, I don't want you to leave here trying to change everything you discovered today. If you found one belief that made you stop and say, wow, I've always thought that was just true, you've done something really important. Stay curious about that belief this week. Notice when it shows up. Notice how it affects what you think, what you feel, and the choices you make, the way you respond. And then ask yourself whether the life that belief is helping you create is the life that you want. Because you may discover that what has just felt like just the way I am is actually something you learned a long time ago. And if you learned it, there's room to adapt again. Next week, we're going to stay with the adapted self and the expansive self, but instead of talking about the framework, I'm going to show you what it looks like in an actual life. We'll take an adapted belief and follow it through the way someone perceives what is happening, what she thinks and feels, how she responds, and ultimately the kind of life that belief creates. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, do that now so you don't miss the rest of this month's series. And if you know someone who keeps finding themselves in the same patterns and wondering why they can't seem to change them, send them this video. It may help them see that the place they've been trying to change isn't where the problem begins. And as I always remind us humans, you're not broken, you're adapted, and you are certainly not the problem. It's just time to adapt again. I'll see you soon.